If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. Whether you're a regular listener or you're just finding this podcast, thank you so much for joining me today. And if you're new to the show, I want to let you know that the first several episodes, primarily episodes 1 through 11, contain the basics of the Brain Over Binge approach. So if anything that me or my guest talks about today seems confusing to you, it may help you to go back and listen to those early episodes so that you have a foundation and you have a context for what we're talking about in these more recent episodes. I'm very excited to talk to my guest today. I have a guest on the show, and I know that you'll benefit from hearing her story and her ideas. If you're a regular listener, you know that with each guest that I interview on the show, we have a general topic that we cover in detail. And today's topic is going to be mindfulness, as it's related to getting over binge eating and other food issues that you may have. My guest on the show today is Fernanda, who's the woman behind the site Life on Tellus. She's a mindfulness and food freedom coach and a student of the 3 principles. Fernanda has a passion for learning, and she has 2 master's degrees, 1 MBA, and 1 in dance. She calls herself a true sci-fi and fantasy nerd, and you can find her today working in the financial markets or geeking out on all things neuroplasticity. I love your bio, Fernanda. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive deeper here, I want to say that it's really extra special for me personally to have Fernanda on the show today because she was part of the Brain Over Binge 8-week group course and the after course support group a while ago, and I got to see some of her transformation. And it's just so amazing to me to know that she's left her eating issues in the past and she's now focusing on helping others do the same. But Fernanda, I'll let you tell the audience more about that in your own words, and I know we'll get into that throughout today's show. And to get started, and before we go deeper into mindfulness, I want to ask you to share some of your own background and your eating struggles and overcoming those struggles, and then also a little bit about the work that you do today.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much, Kathryn, I want to say that you played a huge part of my journey. So it was not just a small corner or a little bit of my transformation. I would say that finding you and finding your book is the point in my life, the moment in my life where everything changed for me. So I would say that's pretty big. That's pretty huge. So talking a little bit about my story, I would say that I have been what you call a high achiever all my life. And I started dancing when I was 17. And a year later, I was accepted into a dance school here in Sweden for a full-time year prepping to get into the Swedish Ballet Academy, where only like 10% get accepted. And I got in on my first try. And I graduated as one of their top students and was even awarded the biggest scholarship for young dancers in Sweden. And then after 10 years in the dance world, I wanted to change careers. And I had 2 small children. And I decided to pursue one of my other passions, math and economics. So I got an MBA and while working full time and while raising 2 small children. And I graduated not only earlier, but I was offered my dream job 1 year before finishing my studies. But, and here's the big paradox, you guys, that I wanted to share with you, Kathryn, and with the listener, is that even though I was successful in my life and in my career, I was failing miserably with food and with my eating. I couldn't stick to a simple food plan, even if my life depended on it. And this drove me crazy. I could not control food. Food controlled me. And the food chatter and the intrusive food thoughts took up all my headspace. And I was not living. I was just surviving. And I truly believed that something was so wrong with me. And I was even part of a food addiction group. And to be honest, Kathryn, it just got worse. It just kind of reinforced the feeling that something was wrong with me, that I was broken, that this could never ever change, that I was a hopeless case. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around it, that how can a person who kind of is I'm managing pretty well in life, how can I not figure this thing out? This thing that is so simple in a way, it's just food and eating. And just like you, Kathryn, sharing in your book and your story also, I was binge eating. And here's the thing, at one moment, I felt that it was the lowest moment in my life. I felt that I could not even manage the food addiction group. I was even a loser at that. I truly felt that this was impossible. I would never, ever be able to overcome this. And then one day I was I guess in a last desperate attempt, I was Googling, like, how do I just stop binge eating? I guess something like that. And I was just searching stuff. And then this podcast showed up that you, Kathryn, were on as a guest. And I just started listening to that episode. And I heard you sharing your story, very straightforward. And what I heard was this. I was a binge eater for many, many years, and it looked like this. And what it looked like was exactly how my life looked like. And then you said, I found something, and I stopped binge eating from one moment to the other, and I never looked back. That was kind of what I heard. I know you probably shared a longer story than that. And I was floored. I was mind blown. I was shocked. I was outraged. I was like, really? I can't believe this. And I just had to read your book. So I bought it and I just read it I think in less than, I am a true book nerd and I'm such a geek. So I speed read your book. And I just knew that you had shown me something and I would never be able to look back from this. And here's the thing, in that moment, I knew that what you were pointing towards was the truth, that nothing is wrong. And this is just a habit gone wrong. And this has to do with the brain. And here's the thing, I had been practicing mindfulness for over 10 years. So my mom is a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and she has been talking about mindfulness for many, many years and dragging me to mindfulness conferences. And the first time I went to one, I was highly pregnant with my first child. He's 12 years now. And I didn't really understand what mindfulness was. And it was a 2-day conference with all the hotshot mindfulness teachers from all around the world and from Sweden. And I just kept falling asleep. But I guess something clicked or resonated with me that day as well, because mindfulness has been been a part of my life since then. And I kind of, I don't know, maybe because of my mom, I was talking about it as well. It has been present in my being, I guess. But when I read your book, coming back to that, it was like all the pieces of the puzzle just came together. And I saw what you were pointing towards. And you actually talk about this in your book as well. And I understood finally the power of mindfulness and how it really rewires your brain. And that was, for me, the door out of this mess. And it was not a quick fix for me. I know I've shared this before many times. And I know for you, Kathryn, you kind of really quickly understood how to dismiss urges and how to just observe your thoughts. And you ended binge eating pretty quickly, which is amazing. And I love that story. But I know maybe this is super helpful for your listeners as well, because I know many of you that are listening right now maybe feel that I will never get this. Like, I can get it in theory. I read Kathryn's book and I listened to her podcast and I know this is possible, but I can't just get this. It's not a quick fix. Okay. And I want to just tell you guys that there is so much hope, because I was a slow learner as well. It took me time. So after I read your book, I think I spent like half a year probably just doing it on my own and figuring things out and kind of not really knowing and testing new things and new meditations and mindfulness stuff and like building my own path. And then you opened up the doors to your support group, the course that you have. And that was just like reinforcing everything that I was learning, and having you and the wonderful Cookie Rosenblum there as well, guiding us and supporting us and going through your work and your book again and your program. I just felt that this is it. I just, after your course, I was done. I was on my way, I would say, just knowing that if I just keep marching in this direction, this is it. There is no going back from here. So here I am. I am free, just like you, Kathryn. And I still have to like pinch myself. And I did it. It's surreal. And Kathryn, I sometimes I feel like I owe you so much, because you really gave me my life back, and you showed me what is possible, and you showed me that nothing was wrong with me. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
That makes me just so happy to hear your story and to just hear what the transformation that you've made in your life. And I know that you give me a lot of credit, but you did it. I mean, this is something that you did and you made happen, and now you get to be free. And that's just so wonderful. And I love that you're encouraging the listeners that if they are someone like you who maybe gets it intellectually, but can't quite get over that hump of dismissing urges time after time, that it is possible. And if you just keep going, keep learning, get support, it's definitely, definitely possible to be where you are today. So thank you so much for that. That was really inspirational. And I guess I just want to get into the mindfulness that we're going to talk about today. And how did you kind of merge? It seems like you had a background already in mindfulness, and then you learned these brain over binge concepts. How were you able to sort of put them together in your own life?
It's a great question, because what you showed in your book, Kathryn, and I love that it's super geeky and there's a lot of science in there. And yeah, and I'm such a fellow geek, so yay. Geeks unite. But you really point towards science. And so mindfulness can be such a fluffy thing if you don't really understand what it actually is. And you kind of describe it really, and what happens with the lower brain and with the higher brain. And that is mindfulness. That is the heart of mindfulness, that detachment from lower brain and higher brain. So sometimes intellectually we can know that we have, like you shared, the primitive, the lower brain, and then the higher brain where the higher self resides. But what mindfulness does, the practice of mindfulness, and mindfulness is the art of paying attention, of focusing, of refocusing, of being able to let go of thoughts and to quickly shift your attention towards something else or another thought, and holding your attention on something else. And what happens is that the higher brain gets activated. You get this separation, this space between the lower brain and the higher brain. And with mindfulness practice, mindfulness meditation, specifically what I like to call it, or that kind of brain training, which is actually what happens, is you strengthen the higher brain. And by doing so, you get better and better at dismissing urges. So for me, what happened was I noticed that I started to have awareness that I did have food thoughts and intrusive food thoughts. But I also noticed, and what you're pointing towards, Kathryn, is that I didn't have the mental strength to dismiss them. So I noticed them, and that was so frustrating, even though that was a huge thing for me to even be able to see my thoughts. That took me some time as well. I was not aware of the food thoughts in the beginning, but just being able to notice them, that was a huge step. But then the next thing, to be able to dismiss. And I think here's where we get caught up and where a lot of us give up, right? And I did in the beginning as well. I noticed that, oh, I can't dismiss these thoughts. I can't. I notice them and I still follow them. So after a while, I give up, and I had a moment where I was like, this is not for me. It's not going to happen. I'm going to go back to dieting and binging and restricting. And then I was like, hold on, let's try again, and let's try again. And through my daily mindfulness meditation practice, And essentially what mindfulness does is you usually practice paying attention to one thing. So it can be your breath, which is very simple because you can always carry it with you. And noticing when your mind wanders off somewhere else. And then gently and kindly, you bring it back to your thought. And here's the cool thing, because every time you train your brain to come back to where you want it to focus on, it gets stronger and stronger at doing that. It's like a skill. So you are retraining the brain to notice food thoughts, to let them go, and to come back to another thought or the present moment or to your breath. And that is when I started noticing that, by rehearsing and practicing in my meditation moment, I got actually better when it did matter later in the day, when I actually had to dismiss an urge. So I saw it like lifting weights for the brain, like really spending time each day, rehearsing and training the brain to focus on one thing and to dismiss thoughts that show up. And I kept doing that, really focused and really training my brain every single day. And the payoff was huge, because then one day, I remember this so clearly, I was in the kitchen and, where usually all the food thoughts would show up. And I had an intrusive, really strong urge, and I just kind of dismissed it. Like for the first time, like really like, oh, goodbye, talk to the hand, not interested. Really, like I had practiced in my meditation for weeks and weeks. I had been practicing. And I know, Kathryn, that you talk about this to really, really celebrate when we dismiss an urge. And I just like happy danced around like I'm a badass. I was so happy. It was such a huge moment. And from then on, I knew that I could do it. Like that was enough. And then I did not dismiss every thought immediately. It just kept on taking a lot of practice for me. But here's the thing also, I had over 25 years, I think, of binge eating and just being a mess around food, which is kind of a long time. So that also is something, I guess, if you're listening right now, just to take that into account. If you have been, eating in a disordered way, whatever that looks like for you, or just kind of feeling that you do not have any power around food. And if you have been struggling with that for many, many years, as I have, then just know that it might take some time and that it might take more mental practice, that it's not just something that might happen in a moment. And I just want to acknowledge something as well, because of course you can have a deep insight where everything changes for you in the moment. And you do notice that, wow, like you had, Kathryn, a moment that is kind of so huge and everything changes from within and you see everything very differently. And everything changes from there. And you just know that you will never binge eat again. And I know that happens. And I have students myself that has had that kind of deep insight and never looked back. And to all of you, I say you guys are so lucky, you have no idea. But I would say that to the rest of us, and I'm just making an educated guess here, but we are kind of the majority. It takes time. It takes time and it takes patience. But here's the thing. Just imagine if you invest your time and your energy in training your brain, in rehearsing this, in diving deep into what Kathryn is sharing with you and teaching you. And just say, I'm going to give this my all. And what if it takes 6 months or a year? Or what if it takes longer? Because here's the thing. The payoff is huge. It is immense. And what you will notice is that it's not about food anymore. This thing that Kathryn shows us is like the biggest, most badassest mind hack that you can have. Once you learn this with food, you can apply it all over the place with all kinds of crappy thinking, and life becomes just awesome. So awesome life. It's what's waiting.
That's so amazing to hear. I just love how you describe how you develop that skill of dismissing urges by training your brain, training your higher brain, that prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that you need to dismiss the urges. It's not like you didn't have the skill. It's just that you needed to develop it, I guess. it's like you said, you had been binging for so many years that it just was out of practice. That ability was inside you, but you had to train it. I love how you use the word rehearsing, how you use the word basically like weight training for the higher brain. And it's mindfulness meditation is one of the tools I mention in my book for people who are struggling to dismiss urges. And it's just so great to hear your story and see that come to life and see that, you know, you made it work for you. And it's just awesome. I just love it. And it encourages people not to give up. There's always something you can do to sort of train that higher brain. Now, I know that you work with people and help them develop this skill. What would you say to someone who's never really done any meditation before, someone who's not really been introduced to mindfulness? How could they get started in this practice?
Oh, that's an awesome question. So in my blog, I write a lot about mindfulness and what mindfulness is and how to get started. And so that's always a place to just kind of check it out. But there are the most amazing mindfulness teachers out there, like the big ones. And there are amazing meditation apps that I just would highly recommend. And you have the mindfulness app, I think also the Calm app, just to get started. Go for one of those apps and check out Rick Hansen, his fantastic mindfulness teacher, and Jack Cornfield and Tara Brach. I love all of them, to be honest. You could just pick anyone that you resonate with and that you kind of like what you hear and just get curious. Something that I want to say, because I guess sometimes mindfulness is just thrown around as, you know, being in the present moment. And you can get caught up in that kind of shallow stuff in a way, which it is not essentially, because the present moment, it's kind of deep stuff. But at least for me, I know for many years, I did not really understand the power of mindfulness and what it truly is and what it truly shows you. But if you kind of listen, how would I put it? Maybe behind the words or beneath the words, mindfulness points you towards your inner power. It really, really shows you who you truly are and that you are not your thoughts, that you were never your thoughts, that you are the one who is observing your thoughts. And this is kind of a huge, becomes spiritual in a sense, and which is super, super cool. But even cooler as myself and Kathryn, you a fellow geek and science nerd, mindfulness is so backed up by science today. There is so much science now showing that mindfulness really alters your brain. And there is a fantastic book as well called Altered Traits that is just going through all the research on mindfulness. And I really recommend, if you are a kind of geeky person and you want to dive deep into mindfulness, to go ahead and pick up that book, because also it shows you how powerful it is to be able to strengthen your higher brain and take back the control of your being, of your thoughts and your feelings. One thing for me that I learned, and it's a huge thing, is that we do have thoughts and we are not our thoughts. But the coolest thing is that our thoughts create our feelings. Okay, you guys, do you get that? Your thoughts create your feelings. So it's not the food that is creating your emotions and you're driving you to eat emotionally. It's not the circumstances or other people. It's only thoughts. And thoughts live where? Inside of you, in your inner world. So whatever you are experiencing is within you. It's created within you. It has never, ever anything to do with outside stuff.
Yes, Fernanda, that idea that you're not your thoughts has been probably one of the most powerful ideas in my life. I mean, so many people just go through their life thinking that they are their thoughts and they are their feelings and kind of blindly following them and not taking that step back to observe and realize that you do have a choice on kind of what thoughts to follow and what thoughts to dismiss. I mean, that idea was so powerful to me to stop binging and also to just kind of live a better life. And you had mentioned that earlier in the show, that this idea of mindfulness really goes beyond stopping your eating issues and getting freedom from that. And you mentioned that you're a student of the 3 principles, and we both know Amy Johnson, who was on the podcast and who I did a webinar with recently, and she's also teaches the 3 principles. Can you kind of explain how that's made a difference in your life and kind of how that relates to what we're talking about here with thoughts and feelings?
Absolutely. So just let me point back towards what you were saying, Kathryn, that bringing it back to that we have a choice. we are, this is what mindfulness shows you, right? That we're not our thoughts. We're not, our thoughts create our feelings. And from that, just knowing that we do have a choice, that is the power that we have, a choice to not pay attention to a thought and to redirect our attention towards something else, something maybe bigger, or something that we instead would want to put our energy and attention towards. And what you're mentioning with Dr. Amy Johnson, I am such a huge fan of her work and her book as well. And everything that she has been sharing with me and showing me and pointing towards. And as well, it's what mindfulness, how I see it, also points back towards this place of our inner power or our inner wisdom, that there is kind of a bigger intelligence to all of this. And if we take a step back and we understand that what we are experiencing is our thoughts and the feelings that those thoughts create, and that we can take a step back and notice that and see that. And also, maybe if we are curious and a little bit open to it, that maybe there is something else as well, kind of pointing us in the direction we could be taking, or showing us what is possible in every single moment. And I know this can sound so woo and like going completely off track here. And from science, let's dive into the woo world. But there is such a huge connection to science and all that woo stuff. And especially to this, to really truly coming back and seeing that maybe you are not who you think you are. And I mean that in a big sense and in a good sense, that sometimes we get so attached to our identity, to our thinking, to our emotions, and to the behavior that drives. And we believe that that is who we are. And if we are just willing for a moment to let go, not only of thoughts, which can feel kind of scary as well, but to the emotions that come along and to the behavior that comes with that. For example, overeating or binge eating or whatever you're struggling with. To just notice that there is something else there to catch you, that you were never alone in this, that there is an intelligence, a wisdom, as Amy puts it, and maybe you want to call it your intuition, that is there all this time and has been there all this time, beneath all that food chatter and food thought and all those thoughts that kind of have been clouding our presence, our true being. And this has been such a huge part, I think, of what I've been seeing through all this, Kathryn. And it all started with your book in a way. And I mean, of course, way back with just mindfulness and all this stuff, but it's been unfolding at full speed since I read your book, because by you pointing me towards this truth, I discovered that, yeah, I'm not my thoughts. And who knew? I thought I was my thoughts for my life. I was sure of it. I didn't know it could be any other way. And I want to invite the listeners to this as well, to be curious and I know Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz also talks about this. And I know, Kathryn, you quote him as well, and you refer to him in your book. And he's just amazing. And he talks about mindfulness and brain science as well. And he also says this, to be curious, and he's inviting you into that spiritual journey, because there is something behind that habitual behavior, behind the food thoughts, behind all that ruminating, all those intrusive thoughts. Once you kind of start letting all that go, you find something else. And that place is pretty cool. So the work that you put into this, the time, the rehearsing, or just staying in this conversation and looking towards this. And Kathryn is doing a fantastic job with the podcast and everything, and pointing you guys in this direction. Keep walking in this direction. Don't lose this. Really, really look towards this, because there is amazing things beyond this. It really, truly changes your life.
Definitely. And I think that hearing about the bigger picture is amazing, and it's really important, and it shows you kind of what's possible. But if that doesn't resonate with you yet, that's okay. Like, you can just start with, 2 minutes per day of just trying to observe your thoughts. And like Fernanda said, picking a focal point like your breath. And I have a meditation in my book, the Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide, just a very simple, like 2-minute, 5-minute meditation. You can start really small. If you just can have that little insight that you're not your thoughts, it makes a huge difference, because then suddenly these thoughts that tell you that you need to binge, and these are the reasons you need to binge, and these feelings that make you feel compelled to binge, suddenly they just don't seem so real or so compelling. So you don't feel like you have to take this really into the spiritual realm to start with. If you can just start to practice and train that prefrontal cortex, train that higher brain to see that you're not your thoughts, and therefore to not act on those harmful thoughts, that in itself is life-changing. Do you agree with that?
I love that. And I agree so much. You have no idea, because here's the thing. I know I talk about mindfulness and it becomes all spiritual, and totally it sounds like I'm sitting on a meditation nook and just having incense all around me. And I'm like, no, I have 3 kids, you guys, and I meditate here and there, and it's messy and everyone is screaming around me. And I meditate on the bus on my way to work, and I just train my brain. And as Kathryn says, I have 2 minutes, I will practice, and I rehearse dismissing thoughts and being in the moment and all these things in action. And it looks just like that, just very normal. No fancy meditation gear or a special cushion to sit on. Standing, walking, whatever you are doing, take a moment to rehearse this. Rehearse dismissing urges. Rehearse noticing your thoughts. Rehearse just paying attention to your breath. Like, that is how the brain changes. It's really simple. And the brain is plastic. It has no choice but to change if you kind of teach it new tricks. So just do it whenever you can. There is really so many moments in the day when we can just say, okay, I'm going to have a minute here and there and see what happens. And you might be surprised that a lot of stuff happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I recovered, I was using mindfulness without even really knowing it. I mean, I definitely didn't have a practice, but I had just learned that skill of observing thoughts. It was based on what I learned in Rational Recovery by Jack Trimpey about the primitive brain and then the higher brain, and how you can use the higher brain to not listen to that addictive voice inside of your lower brain, or he calls it the beast brain. So I was doing this and I didn't even know. And then after I had stopped the habit, that's when I came across Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz's material, like you mentioned, and he talks about how he taught his OCD patients mindfulness and then had, measurable physical changes in their brain. And that just blew me away. And it just sort of put everything together for me. And I guess the point is just that I'm trying to tell you that you don't have to have this perfect practice every day. And like Fernanda said, this meditation pillow, it's just a skill that you can incorporate into your life the way that it works for you. It doesn't have to look any certain way, but if you do want some specific tips and tools, there's definitely tons of resources out there. Fernanda mentioned some books, and I would love also, Fernanda, as we wrap up today, for you to kind of share how the listeners can learn more about you. And I know you also have a free gift, like a mini meditation training session that you'd like to give people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am found on the site lifeontellus.com, and I think I'm all over social media as Life on Tellus as well. So you can just find me on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and all those geeky places. But yeah, I have a free audio training that is called Let Me Talk You Out of It. And it's the longest name, but it's basically just me talking to you in those moments when you are about to go off the rails and you're about to go into Bingeville, or, to eat against your will. And what I do is I talk you out of it, and I talk you back to your senses, and I walk you through a mindfulness practice. So you guys are all welcome to download that free audio training, and you can find it on my website, lifeontellus.com.
Awesome. And I'm going to include your website in the show notes, and also I'll include a link to get that free audio training, and it's lifeontellus, TELLUS.com. And yeah, Fernanda, is there any kind of closing thoughts you'd like to share as we wrap up today?
I guess, Kathryn, the one thing that I want to tell the listeners is what I said in the beginning as well, that if you feel that this is taking too long and that you are not getting this, and, first of all, as I said, you're not alone. And second, there is so much hope, truly so much hope. And what I want to encourage everyone is to don't be afraid to, seek support. Kathryn has the course. Just learn more. Jump in there. Reach out. We are many of us now teaching this and helping you guys. We're all sharing so many free resources, and just immerse yourself in this and see if you start learning and seeing something new, and just stick with it. It is so worth it. Truly. I know it can be so tempting to just say, well, if this is not working, like in a week, or maybe I will give it 2 weeks, I will go back to dieting or whatever it is that you're doing. And of course, that will perpetuate the habit and you're back in Bingeville and back to your old mess. And just to give this a fair chance. Like truly, I see this again and again with many of my students too, and they expect a quick fix and they are so frustrated when they are not seeing this in the first day. But then over time, they do see this and they do learn this skill and they have freedom. And that freedom is just incredible. And just know that that is possible for you guys, truly possible. So I guess that's what I want to leave this conversation with.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I've absolutely loved this conversation. I know that the listeners will find it super helpful and encouraging and inspiring. So I just want to really thank you for being on the show today, Fernanda.
Oh, thank you, Kathryn. Really, it's just my pleasure to be here talking to you. Just once again, Kathryn, the work you do is just amazing. You are changing the world. You are changing the paradigm around eating and eating disorders and dieting. And I don't know, just forever grateful. I know I always say that, but truly, you change lives. And that is so awesome. That is beyond awesome. So thank you so much for having me on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. And you are doing an amazing job changing lives as well and using your own ideas to just help people where they may be stuck. So just keep doing the awesome work that you're doing too. And as we end today, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.